Is expected next week. And let's bring in former Pennsylvania Congressman and retired three-star Admiral Joe Sestak, who's been monitoring the situation. He is also a potential U.S. Senate candidate for Pennsylvania. Joe, good to see you. How are you?
Good to be with you, Jose. Thanks.
Now, as someone who commanded an aircraft carrier battle group in the war against terrorism, let me ask you about the president's new strategy. What do you think of it?
I think it's correct. And actually, Jose, to be honest, I think it was a little bit slow getting there. But this is a threat, not today, but over time, that if we just let ISIS have a safe haven there in broad areas of Iraq, they have the resources. They're actually the richest of all terrorist groups in the world to eventually do damage against us. So by doing surgical airstrikes, and my battle group flew over Iraq, and being able to have the intelligence, which is so much better today than it was back when we invaded Iraq a decade ago, and then having the training on the ground for the Kurds as well as Baghdad forces, that eventually there will be the troops that will roll them out of that safe haven. That's objective one. Objective two then is putting out the fire. That's in Syria, and that's different. We will do some strikes there to stop the logistic bases that actually sustain over the long lines of communications the ISIS in Baghdad, Iraq. But it's going to be Jordan helping us train, as we've done the last 2 years, with about 300 special forces, the more moderate rebel forces, to eventually fill the vacuum as ISIS is driven out of Syria.
So let's talk about those forces that are going to help take ISIS out of Syria. There are concerns from many about plans to arm and train these rebels. Expert tells the New York Times their loyalties are all over the map. Who are these rebels the president wants to arm and train, and can we trust them? Do we have any allies, friends in that area?
Well, there's not a question that sometimes you have allies and friends of the moment. But we would fight with the devil incarnate right now to make sure that there's no damage to us. We gave radios over 3 years ago to these rebels out there, and we didn't give radios to them, Jose, because it was charity. We put chips in them. We kind of listen in, and we figured out who was who in the zoo. Now, Jordan's military intelligence organization that gave us Zakari, head of the al-Qaeda in Iraq years ago, is all over this. Our advisors are there. We've got a pretty decent idea who these moderate rebels are. Doesn't mean at the end game they're going to love us all the way, but it does mean they're not going to be against us. And so we have a pretty good idea, and frankly, we should have given them small arms much more quickly several years ago, because I think the prospects of ISIS not having taken over a vacuum there would have been less possible.
I want to talk to you a little bit more about the politics. Chuck Todd interviewed Congressman Paul Ryan for Meet the Press. Here's what he said about the president saying there would be no U.S. boots on the ground.
I don't think you should ever take things off the table. That's one of the mistakes I think the president consistently makes, which is telling our enemies what we will not do. But look, at this point, I just think
can you imagine, though,
opposition be supported? If the president's changing his policy for the better, we should be supporting him.
Was it a mistake, Joe, you think, for the president to insist there will be no ground troops?
I think the president should have been much more blunt that, frankly, there's already hundreds of special advisors on the ground. And make that very, very clear that without them training these moderate rebels, without them advising the Sunni militias and/or the Baghdadian forces, our surgical strikes could not be as accurate. That said, the thing that is often lacking, and I worked at the National Security Council as Director of Defense Policy for President Clinton, is that often when people talk about military strategies, they don't set a clear objective and benchmarks the means by which you can accomplish it and measure whether you're achieving them. The president has said no safe haven. Got it. Number two, he says, and should make it clear, here's how we achieve it. And if we're not then achieving it and he's got to change the strategy, come back to the public. But I don't think we need any combat forces on the ground at all right now.
And I think
nor do I think in the future.
Right, and I think it's important that the president let the American people know that that is the policy and the plan, because, you know, in the past, things can really creep quickly. And I think the president, that statement is for Americans than it is for ISIS.
Jose, that's a wonderful point, because I feel that the transparency and the clearness of what our mission is absolutely critical in the means to accomplish. It's why I came on MSNBC a couple years ago and said I didn't support the Libya incursion, because it wasn't clear what our real mission was, the removal of Gaddafi, or is it to save 100 people in Benghazi? You've got to be clear about these things, and I think we as an administration haven't historically done that well.
Admiral Joe Sestak, what a pleasure to have you on. Look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks.
Great to be with you.
And let's bring in Congressman Mike Turner, Republican for